What's up, you guys? Today's animated series review is based on four brothers who were mutated into giant sea creatures by an evil scientist who is plotting to take over the world, and I'm talking about Street Sharks. Street Sharks, the animated series, aired in 1994, consisting of 3 seasons with a total of 40 episodes. The story takes place in a city called Fishin, where Dr. Robert Bolton, a professor of Fishin State University, catches his partner Dr. Luther Paradigm secretly experimenting on combining human and aquatic animal DNA with the machine they invented called the Gene Slammer. This allows it to create anthropomorphic hybrids. Knowing what type of power the Gene Slammer can possess, Dr. Paradigm ends up using it for personal gain, and while in an attempt to stop him, Dr. Bolton gets in contact with the serum and is transformed into this unknown monster and escapes unseen. Later, with him out of the way, Dr. Paradigm realizes he can't fully be in control until Dr. Bolton's 4 sons, John, Clint, Coop, and Bobby, are also terminated. After ambushing them into a trap, all 4 Bolton brothers were captured and experimented on using the DNA of 4 different kinds of sharks. Assuming the mutation had no effect, Paradigm had the Bolton brothers tossed away for dead since they were now useless, not realizing the serum was only having a late reaction. So after the mutation had finally processed, the Street Sharks were born. Now raged with vengeance and understanding that Dr. Paradigm had something to do with their father's disappearance and the fact that he wants to transform the entire city into his personal slave creatures with his experimentations, it's up to them to put an end to his plans. So with these new appearances, each of the Bolton brothers changed their name to best fit their personality to create a new identity, such as RIPSTER, the Great White Shark aka John Bolton, the leader, the innovator, and the smartest of the group. Jab, the Hammerhead Shark aka Clint Bolton, the lazy one with the rough temper. STREEX, the Tiger Shark aka Bobby Bolton, the most adventurous and the ladies' man who always wears his rollerblades. And Big SLAMMU, the Whale Shark aka Coop Bolton, a football player and the powerhouse among the 4 being the biggest and the toughest. Despite them being the 4 main characters, they were also assisted on a lot of missions by a few human allies like Benz, a technician for Fishin State University and a very useful asset to the team, LENA MACK, a student of Dr. Paradigm's who is skeptical of his behavior, Detective Michael Brock, and President David Horn, the President of the United States. Although the Street Sharks were one of the first to be gene slammed, they weren't the only ones, as other characters were also mutated throughout the show, like MOBY LICK, a killer whale aka Jets Taylor, Rox, a bull/mako shark aka Melvin Kresnick, a musician, Manta Man, a manta ray aka Dr. Terrence Morton, a scientist, El Swardo, a marlin fish who's a circus performer under the same name, and Paxel, a mutated crocodile who lives underground that's part of the geckos. As for the villains, Dr. Paradigm started off human and created the suit of armor to fight off the sharks, but during an altercation with him, he too was accidentally gene slammed with the DNA of a piranha, now known as Dr. PIRANOID. With his new appearance that can only be triggered when he's mad and a pretty hilarious voice change, he rallied up a group of creatures by gene slamming more animals now known as Seviants under his control, such as Slobster, Slash, Killamari, Reptile, Shrimp Louie, Tentakill, different variations of the Sharkbot and Meko Sharks, and many more. Then you also have some sideline villains like Malcolm Medusa III, Clamando, Maximilian Greco, Jackal, and Guy in the Sky. Although not really a villain, he's the media's paparazzo in a yellow helicopter who's always on the radio informing people with all the latest news and somewhat of an instigator. Throughout the series, we're taken into the world of the Street Sharks as they're seen adapting into their new bodies and learning what abilities they have while escaping from the police and the army. This is because Dr. PIRANOID falsely accused of Dr. Bolton for creating these monsters in a press conference to inform the city that the whole family is a threat, thus giving him the upper hand. So in order to remain low-key, the Street Sharks are aided to the rescue by Benz and Lena, who protects them and believe that Dr. PIRANOID is lying about the truth. Benz ends up providing an underground secret hideout located under the university's hockey rink in order for the Sharks to carefully plan their next move while staying out of trouble. He also plays a pivotal role during the whole show as his genius inventions save the Sharks from many predicaments. For example, Benz ends up creating the Sharks their own futuristic vehicles, in which the hover vehicles can be transformed from a video game arcade cabinet, and special armor for tougher battles. During this time, as we get to learn more about the Street Sharks as they enjoy playing pool, considering themselves as pool sharks, no pun intended, they immediately throw shade at another group of 4 mutated animals when Benz asks if they were hungry and should order pizza. But in a disgusted response, they all make hideous faces and prefer eating burgers from their favorite burger joint called Mondo Burger. Of course, that's just scratching the surface, as you obviously can't have a group of heroes without having catchphrases. So with that said, you get a lot of shark-related slogans like Fintastic, Five in a Fin when they're giving high fives, yelling out Shark Attack when making an entrance, and their most popular motto, Jawsome, among many, many more. As the series progresses, Dr. PIRANOID continues to make the Street Sharks look bad and does his best to delete all sorts of Dr. Bolton's evidence to remain trustworthy to the mayor and the news reporters. The Street Sharks eventually come across newly gene-slammed characters considering to be allies, but unfortunately, whenever they welcome an invitation to stay or join the group, they all end up rejecting their offer, which is a shame because some of them are pretty cool. In regards to the villains, Dr. PIRANOID is your typical bad guy who mostly fails every time and insults his Sevians, making them look like idiots. Despite even creating them to help him fight off the sharks, they somehow become incompetent fools he can't rely on, and they usually get their asses kicked even if some have pretty cool powers. Majority of the time, his goal is to capture the Street Sharks and turn them evil or convert the entire population into his slaves. Either way, he never succeeds as it always backfires despite many opportunities. Eventually in the last season, all his evil plots, deceivings to the public, and non-stop illegal experimentations catches up to the public as they finally realize who the actual bad guy really is. Having him finally becoming an outcast and embarrassed, he tries to escape but eventually goes to jail. Unfortunately, by the next episode we can assume he escaped as he was previously digging his way out of the cell, now officially making him a wanted criminal. The last season also takes a change in direction in regards to its storytelling while keeping some formulas of the previous seasons relevant. Right off the bat, you'll notice the amount of characters that were dropped from its roster. For example, you'll immediately realize that Dr. PIRANOID's two Sevians, Slopster and Slash, were replaced by Killamari and Reptile, along with the later additions of two more named Shrimp Louie and Tentakill. As for the allies, despite being mentioned in one episode, Rox was also dropped from the show for unknown reasons, but one can assume he became famous and started touring around the world. Detective Michael Brock was also gone along with Guy in the Sky, even though we never knew who he really was or what he looked like. In some instances, although characters like Moby Lick and Lena were in Season 3, midway through they didn't appear in any more episodes, basically leaving the viewer to wonder what happened to them. Although it was apparent that Moby Lick became an environmentalist, best case scenario, Lena ventured off into different territories trying to expose Dr. PIRANOID's secrets and helping the Street Sharks while maintaining undercover. Regarding the story arcs, it does slightly get a bit darker as the show dives into uncharted waters exposing ruthless dictators, illegal drug dealings, pollution of garbage and toxic waste, gambling with money addiction, and the war between two world leaders of Latonia and Kochnia as it shows them hating each other, bombing each other, and talking about biological weapons during a peace treaty. Of all the extra Gene-Slam characters, Man-to-Man seemed to have the most impact as he faces a great struggle within himself seeking for acceptance for what he's now become. He desperately tries having the courage to face his family as they assume he's dead since he never returned from his space trip. With all that confliction, eventually he finds his way back home thinking he'd be labeled a monster, but little did he know his family still loved him for who he is and not based off his appearance. Two of my favorite episodes had to be the ones called Shark to the Future and Shark Wars, where we get a glimpse into the future of Fishin City as Dr. PIRANOID meets his future self by another machine called the Time Slammer. As the Street Sharks battle these robotic shark androids called Mecho Sharks in a now apocalyptic world, what's really cool about it is that not only do you see the outcome of the airborne virus used on its population, and the dreadful fate of Dr. PIRANOID, but you get to see the Street Sharks and all their allies, minus Moby Lick and Rox, come together to fight this huge battle, which is awesome. As a special surprise, within the last 8 episodes, the Street Sharks get introduced to another group of heroes called the Dino-Vengers. We get to know about their origins, how they arrived while adapting to the planet Earth, calling the humans Softskins, and preventing an evil velociraptor named Bad Rap and his 2 cronies, Hax and Spitter, from the planet Quadrania, from changing the Earth's climate in order for an adjustable living environment. This officially created a shared universe between the 2 brands, thus allowing the Dino-Vengers to star in their own show called Extreme Dinosaurs. Instead of focusing on the actual Street Sharks story arc, they somewhat take the back seat as the Dino-Vengers get more of a focus. Dr. PIRANOID also gets shoved to the side and barely gets seen until one episode where he now has green scales, tries to get raptor DNA from Bad Rap but instead is given iguana DNA, eventually mutating him into more of a lizard rather than being a raptor. Now seen as this weak, useless, scaly being with another new name, Dr. Iguanoid. Now under Bad Rap's control, Dr. Iguanoid still does his best to take over the world to show he's the real threat, but eventually fails thanks to the street sharks, and once and for all is finally captured and imprisoned, leaving Bad Rap to retreat and leave Earth. The really cool part is, at the beginning of the series, the street sharks started off being misunderstood by the media as they're always on the run and trying to clear their name from Dr. Paradigm's falsely accused statements. But as time goes on, they help fight crime, save a few civilians, and eventually befriend the police. When you get near the end of the series, you can't help but to feel a little proud for these guys because not only did they clear their names, becoming loyal allies to the military, appreciated and accepted by the humanity of Fishin City, they also earned the respect and became friends with President Horn, who personally calls them, asking for their help in more broader scenarios rather than just staying local. And even when given the chance to turn back to being humans, realizing what's at stake and how useless they are without their powers, they decided to remain mutated, so patience is truly a virtue. Although their father was only seen in the first episode and disappears after, we briefly get indications here and there that he's still around watching his sons when they become curious, as he usually sends the street sharks these secret email messages helping them defeat Dr. Piranoid's latest schemes. Whenever they get close to finding his location, they always end up too late as the whole place had been evacuated, yet still leaving notes. In some episodes, we see silhouettes of Dr. Bolton and some scenes of him kicking Dr. Piranoid's ass, making him feel guilty for what he's done before vacating. And in the last season, we're shown him actually talking to the street sharks through a glitched out computer with static before the screen fades away, thus leaving that to be his final appearance on the show. Sadly, we never knew what he really looked like or if he'll ever reconnect with his sons, leaving it to be an emotional cliffhanger. Some of the more bizarre things that can't go unnoticed in the show is how the street sharks continuously destroy the city's infrastructure and no one seems to really mind, and despite being half sharks, they still need scuba gear to go in the water. Then you have moments where in the beginning when the four Bolton brothers awoke after being experimented on and almost killed, any normal person would go back, call the police, and shut down Dr. Paradigm's lab, but instead, they nonchalantly decided to go get something to eat and forgot all about it. You also have moments when we do get scenes of people being frightened and screaming, but within a few minutes, it somehow gets ignored as the kids start finding them cool and girls even start to find some of them attractive, making it somewhat of a joke. And speaking of no reaction, when Benz first encounters the street sharks, he doesn't even get scared and with no hesitation, he just accepts them probably because he was stoned. And to make it worse, he immediately becomes part of the fugitive group and performs these outrageous unlogical stunts in his vehicle that seems impossible to really do, and there's plenty of those to see. And last but not least, aside some weird creepy angled facial expressions, we have these god-awful mid-scene music video intermissions in a 4-boxed grid that randomly appears showcasing previous scenes from the episodes with random shark rock music which was highly unnecessary. But let's not forget that one of the funniest things this show had to offer is that even though there are these humanoid sharks roaming around the city, apparently the civilians are just as stupid and blind for listening and taking a guy wearing a giant cape, an eye patch, dangerous accessories for hands, with a tube over his head seriously. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. This show starts off pretty fast-paced regarding to how quickly they learn what they can and can't do in their shark forms. But somewhere by the middle, it drags and takes a bit of time to get the story going. And when it actually picks up, gets a bit more darker, and includes several deep storylines, it unnecessarily shoves the Dino Avengers into the spotlight, leaving the show to feel a little bit all over the place, not knowing what sense of direction the creators wanted to go in. It's really unclear if the show had planned for this or if it was actually cancelled, as it still had a lot of loose ends to fill. However, you can't get any more 90s than this. The voice acting is decent, along with its complementary music. The animation style is pretty jawsome, and especially with the way they design the characters, this definitely led kids at the time to desperately want the action figures. Even though it contained many fillers, anticlimactic story arcs, and a wide range of action, characters, and somewhat real-life scenarios, it's definitely an entertaining show to watch for casual viewers who want to have a good laugh for its cheesy dialogues and far-fetched ideas. Regardless of its negative reviews, I think they did a decent job wanting to have competition to other shows based off the same concept. Therefore, Street Sharks the Animated Series gets a B-. Thanks for watching, give a like and subscribe for more animated series reviews, and stay tuned for the next episode.